happens when we cut ourselves off from human interaction at a young age. How does a human function when they're not around other humans? These kids we're talking about were brought up by animals, and it's quite strange to see how much humans can adopt a different lifestyle. 22. The Ostrich Boy. Birds and humans are vastly different creatures. Even though both humans and ostriches can't fly, you can't deny they're not super similar. However, they're compatible enough on a certain level for these huge birds to be able to raise a boy. Sidi Mohammed was about 6 years old before he wandered away from his family and into an ostrich nest. The ostriches raised him, taught him, and apparently cared for him. At 12 years old, he returned to human society. 21. Baby Hospital. We're not talking about a hospital ran especially for the care of babies. We're saying that's the name of the next child we're about to discuss. Named by the Italian missionary who found her, Baby Hospital was discovered in Sierra Leone, apparently raised by either monkeys or apes. She could not walk and would crawl instead, unable to stand in an upright position. As for her behavior, she cried a lot, an uncommon trait amongst feral children. 20. Boy of War. After the Ugandan Civil War caused the passing of his parents, a small boy named Robert would be forced to live in the wild. Running away from the soldiers raiding their village, Robert fled, met by vervet monkeys that would end up raising him. For 3 years, he lived amongst these primates until soldiers found him and took him back to civilization. 19. The Wolf Children of Hesse. Not just one, but a few instances of children from Hesse being raised by wolves were heard around the grapevine back in the 1300s. One of the cases took place in 1304. The story is of a boy who said he was kidnapped by wolves at the age of 3. He said himself that wolves raised him and would feed him whenever they captured prey for themselves. It doesn't seem like wolves would be the ones to take other young creatures from their homes just to raise them, so it's all a bit mysterious. 18. The Ugandan Monkey Boy. Living in a jungle for years can take a toll on a person. However, if that's all you've ever really known, maybe then it's not even weird. Take John Sebunya, the young boy who was raised by monkeys for years in the Ugandan jungle back in the 90s. Sebunya fled to the forest, running away from the traumatizing events at home, and then was taken in by vervet monkeys. After going back to human society, he was adopted and moved to Britain. 17. The Wolf Boy of Moscow. Police in Russia were in search of a boy that was dubbed Lyoka the Werewolf Boy. Found to be living with a pack of wolves in the Kaluga region, authorities took him into a clinic in Moscow to be observed. He was described to have habits like a wolf, appearing intelligent, yet unable to speak a language. Though he appeared 10 years old, tests show he was a little older. Eventually, he fled from the clinic. 16. Living with cats. Back in 2008, authorities discovered a toddler in Misiones, Argentina, living with wild cats. Not only had the 1-year-old boy been in their company, it appears the cats cared for him too. They seemed to have stayed on top of him or licked him during the night in order to keep him warm during the winter. The boy had been separated from his father while the two were out during the father's job. 15. The Puma Parents. Let's rewind to 1948 when a 12-year-old boy was discharged from the hospital San Vicente in Chile after being discovered living amongst pumas. Yup, pumas, as in mountain lions. How the big cats decided to raise him instead of eat him remains a mystery, though it seems the pumas reared the young boy named Vicente Cacao. Reports show that he knew how to communicate with a sort of sign language and could communicate somewhat with humans, but for the most part behaved like an animal. 14. The Guardian Dog. Ever since the age of 3 months old, a young boy named Andrei Tolstik was raised by a dog that had been keeping guard of him for about 7 years. He lived in a remote part of Siberia, which of course makes living out in the wild that much more difficult. It appears his parents abandoned him as a baby and would be discovered by social workers years later. With no interaction with humans for years, he could not speak. 13. The Real Tarzan. Technically, any of these children could be called their own versions of Tarzan or Mowgli, but what makes Saturday Mithiani more similar was that he was raised by orangutans. Near KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, the small boy was discovered residing with monkeys. Only 5 years old, he was named Saturday since that's the day he was found. Fast forward 10 years, he's still exhibiting animal-like behaviors. 12. The Nigerian Chimp Boy. In 1996, a boy of 2 years old was discovered to have been raised by chimpanzees for nearly 2 years. Named Bello, the boy inhabited the Falgore forest with the chimps after being abandoned by his parents. Authorities guess his parents left him as a result of Bello being born with mental as well as physical disabilities. 11. The Mowgli Boy of Romania. After seeing her son on a television news report, Lena Calderar would claim him. The two were separated after Lena ran away from her husband's home for beating her, and she guesses the same went for her son, Trian. Police discovered the boy, who at the time was 7 years old, after a shepherd found him living in a cardboard box. He appeared to forget how to speak. Doctors guess he must have been looked over by wild dogs as an explanation to how he survived for so long. 10. The Lithuanian Bear Boy. Travel back in time to the days of the Queen of Poland from the years 1664 to 1688. In these archives show that there was only one boy reported to have lived with bears in the forests of Poland. He was apparently discovered in the wild during the spring of 1663, an interesting thing to keep record of. He would be brought to the capital city, and the rest, they say, is history. There's a story of there being 3 Lithuanian bear boys, but only one was proven true. 9. The Goat Boy of the Andes. In 1990, hikers traversing the landscape of the Andes would come across a young boy living with a herd of goats. In these Peruvian mountains, the boy appears to have been living in the wild for about 8 years. He would drink goat's milk, eating mostly berries and roots. He didn't have any human language capabilities, though he seemed to be able to communicate effectively with goats from his herd. He only walked on all fours, callousing his hands and feet. 8. The Runaway Boy. At the age of 4 years old, Ivan Mishukov ran away from his home, where he seemed to be experiencing abuse. For refuge, he found a home in the streets, living with a pack of stray dogs after he shared food with them. They became loyal to him, letting him become the pack leader. In turn, the dogs protected him from the cold, and in Moscow, it gets really cold. He lived with the canines for 2 years. To this day, it's been said that Mishukov has lived a normal life after he came back to living with humans. 7. The Bamberg Boy. This tale goes back to the 1500s. It tells of a little boy, one who lived in Bamberg, Germany. He wasn't raised by monkeys, by wolves, or by dogs. Instead, the story goes was that he was raised by cattle. There isn't much else known about the mysterious Bamberg Boy, except for he probably ate a lot of grass. 6. Alex the Dog Boy. Once again, to modern times, a boy named Alex was found running away from police. He appeared to have lived with stray dogs and was seen shivering outside in the cold. Police tried to take him in, to which he responded by fleeing. He had a violent demeanor, said to also be inarticulate. It was later found out that this boy from Chile had been abandoned by his 16-year-old mother at the age of 5 months. Locals called him Dog Boy. 5. Raised by dogs. One of the most famous cases of being raised by animals includes that of Oksana Malaya, who is now 34 years old. Back during her childhood, she grew up with alcoholic parents. Surrounded by dogs where she lived, she started to behave like a dog. As a result, she lacked language skills and adopted the hygiene of a canine. Authorities didn't realize this was happening until she was nearly 8 years old. However, she has since grown up and is able to speak and says she wants to be treated like a human being. 4. The girl who disappeared for 40 years. When it comes to being gone, 40 years is a really long time, and that's nearly how long Nong Chairi had been missing for. She's now 50 years old, though she wasn't found until she was 42. She had been living in a jungle in India near Myanmar for decades, missing from her small village since she was only 4 years old. Apparently, she functions more or less like a normal human being, though she's been called quite shy. 3. Treated like a pet. Now that you've gotten this far down the list, have you ever wondered what it would be like if you were raised like these feral kids were raised? Perhaps you should ask someone like Natasha Mikalova, who was raised as a pet. She was discovered at 5 years old in 2009, nicknamed the Mowgli Girl. She didn't even live out in the wild, however. She lived with her father, grandparents, and other relatives, yet she was raised as if she was a dog. Natasha would drink from a bowl on the floor, had a small vocabulary, and would talk in animal noises instead. 2. The Boy Who Lived with Wolves. For 12 years, Marcos Rodriguez Pantoja resided with the wolves mostly for company. At the age of 7 years old, his father sold him to a farmer to be able to help out an old goat herd. After the old man passed away, however, Pantoja was left all alone. He finally returned to human life at the age of 19 and has been back since. Fortunately for him, the goat herd taught him to survive in the wild before he passed, which explains how Pantoja lived for so long in the wilderness. 1. Living in the jungle. One of the most famous feral children who grew up is Marina Chapman. This Colombian-born woman was kidnapped from her village and then released into the jungle not too long after. She was raised by capuchin monkeys for years until hunters found her and sold her to a brothel. After escaping the brothel, she lived on the streets, eventually becoming a slave to a mafia family. We know, this sounds like a really weird movie. In 2013, she published her autobiography with a documentary on National Geographic released the next year. She is now about 68 years old. Which of these cases of feral children seem the most intriguing to you? Would you ever want to be raised by animals? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, don't forget to like and subscribe.